I remember a day like this 25 years ago. I would like to begin by welcoming first and foremost the families and friends of the 248 soldiers and 8 crew members we honor today in this 25th anniversary memorial ceremony. Some of you have come a long ways to be here today. I talked to a family from Amarillo, Texas, that drove 15 hours to be here. Another family who came from Wisconsin. Others came from California to be here for this 25th anniversary. Thank you for coming. This is your day. It's for you and for your soldier. I would also like to recognize the former members of the 3rd Battalion of the 502nd Orphans today also. Some have traveled long distances to be here to honor their fellow soldiers and their comrades. Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank Colonel Johnson and Command Sergeant Major Fauntleroy, who are here from the MFO in the Sinai. They too have come here to remember Task Force 3502nd. Mrs. Campbell, Mrs. Schroeder, General Wierzinski, distinguished guests, and I know there are many here, ladies and gentlemen. My wife Marlene and I are honored to be back here at Fort Campbell and participating in this memorial ceremony. Our time here at Fort Campbell holds some of our fondest memories, but it also holds our greatest sorrow. It's a sorrow that doesn't fade with time, even after 25 years. And today it's a privilege to be back in the company of old friends, the Army's finest soldiers, and the great supporting cast we have from the communities around Fort Campbell, but particularly with family and friends. Today in Arlington National Cemetery there was a ceremony to remember 22 soldiers from Task Force 3502nd. The ceremony is sponsored by the White House Office of Remembrance. Their purpose is to encourage Americans to honor the service and sacrifice of our country's fallen men and women. Midway down Section 60 at Arlington is a row of 22 crosses, where 22 Task Force 3502nd soldiers lay side by side. Marley and I go there every year, almost every year, along with the families of those 22 soldiers. They come from Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, and they bring their children and grandchildren. We gather in front of the headstones. A chaplain gives an invocation. Words of praise and remembrance are spoken by several speakers. A wreath is laid, and taps is played by a bugler from the 3rd Infantry Regiment. After the ceremony, a wreath is laid. After the ceremony, we stay for a while making small talk and talking about their soldiers. We conclude by shaking hands and renewing our commitment to meet there again the following year. In ceremonies, in cemeteries, and church graveyards across the country today, families gather just as we are to remember their peacekeeper. He was a father, a son, a husband, a friend. She was a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a friend. All had one thing in common. They were soldiers who had served on a peacekeeping mission in a very troubled part of the world, the Sinai. They had completed that mission magnificently and were on their way home when tragedy struck. This ceremony is all about remembering. Remembering those young Americans who gave so much for their country and who continue to be loved and missed by family and friends. Today we take time to remember each of them and honor their service. They were 248 of our country's finest soldiers. December 12, 1985 was a day of such tragic proportions that even now you might wonder how we got through it. General Pat Patrick, the division commander at the time, praised the people of Kentucky and Tennessee from the surrounding communities for their outpouring of sympathy, human kindness, and compassion. People not only came from across the street, they came from across the country. And some even from our Canadian neighbors to the north. I believe that what got us through those terrible days was the outpouring of human compassion and the support we received from so many people across America and in Canada. Like many, I also believe that we were fortunate to have a general named Patrick and his lovely wife during this crisis. It was their leadership and example that rallied the division, provided the needed resources, and cared for the families of our soldiers. I also have the greatest respect and admiration for the families who lost a loved one and who suffered through this tragic event. Your courage, your love, and your perseverance was a lesson to us all. On December 16th, 4 days after the tragedy, President and Mrs. Reagan came to a memorial service that was held in Hangar 4. Following the service, the President and Mrs. Reagan met with every family member. And it was not just a handshake and a simple expression of condolence. They took the time with every family to understand their loss and to share their sorrow. They brought with them the condolence of a nation that grieved with us. Today at this site are two beautiful memorials to the peacekeepers of Task Force 3502. To my front is a beautiful memorial that was dedicated on Memorial Day 1987. The tablet contains the name, the rank, and the unit of each of the 248 fallen Eagles. The mural in the center depicts a kneeling soldier, a family, and a dove, the sign of peace. There are two half-mast flags, the Stars and Stripes and the flag of the multinational force and observance. To my rear is a grove of Canadian sugar maples that was inspired by a 15-year-old girl from Ontario, Canada. Her name is Janice Johnson Nickel. Her simple gesture of support inspired the Canadian people to establish this grove of 256 trees as a living memorial to the 248 soldiers and the 8 crew members who perished with them. Each tree has a name, providing a lasting reminder for who each of those peacekeepers were. The trees provide an elegant, living beauty for this site. These trees are also a reminder of the price we sometimes pay for peace. Also earlier today in Gander, Newfoundland, there was another ceremony where the citizens of Gander gathered at their memorial called the Silent Witness Memorial. They too feel the same pain, and they too honor and respect those 248 soldiers and 8 crew members who have died in their community. The Scottish writer and historian Thomas Carlyle once said, "Nothing that was worthy in the past departs. No truth or goodness realized by men ever dies, but is still here, and recognized or not, lives and works through these endless changes. Today, we recognize the worthy deeds of the men and the women of Task Force 3502nd Infantry, 101st Airborne Division. Their lives and their work lives on in our hearts, and in the legacy of the soldiers of this great division. In closing, I would ask that we all remember those who are serving our country today in so many places in the world, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq. General John Campbell and the soldiers of the 101st are in the middle of the fray in Afghanistan, performing their combat mission as Screaming Eagles have done before them. Continue to reach out to them and their families and provide the support and compassion that they will need through their difficult times. They will need your help in the days and weeks to come, and that will help them get through this difficult time. As a poet once said, someone has to guard the passes. And he was talking about the passes of justice and peace. And the 101st has always been in that vanguard. God bless our soldiers. God bless you. And God bless this great country.